Can everyone see this? Okay, so just go back a little bit on the first chapter. Um, this last sentence, in my opinion, it summarized pretty well what chapter one was all about. So it says our potential is one thing, what we do with it is quite another. So there was quite a little bit of discussion in terms of how individual potential will means nothing where we don't have grit or at least the effort to work around that. And it will be discussed much deeper in chapter two, which is entitled Distracted by Talents. So before I talk more about chapter two, I think I have to divide the writer's perspective in this chapter into two categories. So in one category, the writers tells about her personal experience from her perspective, of course. And the other part of some subchapter from chapter twos are actually providing more insight from from the research that her colleagues were doing. So in the first chapter, in the first subchapters, I will put her personal stories and personal experience in yellow. And if it is a research or a book made by her colleague, it will be colored as blue so that we can differentiate which one is a research-based statement and which one are which one is the personal statement. Okay, so she starts by saying that talent is not all there is to achievement. This is basically a continuation from first chapter saying that our potential is one thing, but what we do with it is quite another. So she emphasized that talent is not that all that we needed in order to have an achievements. She also continued telling her stories about how he started her career at McKinsey, but then decided to quit that job and move to become a teacher. And everyone was wondering why leaving McKinsey, one of the biggest consulting firm, global consulting firms, and choose teaching, which definitely pays less and whatever. So she continues by telling her stories, saying that teaching was basically her calling. And when she resigned from McKinsey and started teaching again, she felt that her life was back on track. Or even after that, she continues learning about neuroscience in Oxford. So when she resigned from McKinsey and started her teaching job uh, in a high school, she teach in a school that is located in a distressed urban neighborhood in New York, which means that um, there is not quite a high academic expectations from that school considering the neighborhood. So she was telling the stories on how different the situation is compared to her next school, which she will explain later. So she in this current school in this distressed urban neighborhood, she met with several students who quit studies, who studies, we can call them like the smart one, who when she explained something about math, those students can quickly understands and able to grasp or comprehend the materials. But when the marking period was done, bagi rapot, let's say, some of these very able students he wrote weren't doing as well, which means that students who are considered as less gifted or less talented, they are actually doing better compared to these quick study student. So she also wrote that several of the students who initially struggled were faring better than I'd expected, meaning that those who did not understand the math concept and the materials as quick as the others, they actually have a better marks. because they took notes, because they asked questions, because they tried again and again, and they did the hard work. So after that story, she concluded that aptitude did not guarantee achievement. So I think this is one of the biggest lesson learned that we can have here. Aptitude did not guarantee achievement. Aptitude itu bisa diartikan bakat atau talent. Jadi dia mengatakan bahwa aptitude atau bakat itu tidak menggaransi pencapaian. Karena terbukti bahwa siswa-siswa yang hardworking mendapatkan nilai yang lebih besar daripada siswa-siswa yang quick studies atau yang cepat paham di kelas. Okay, jadi dia merasa, so she thought that she was distracted by talent. She initially assumed that those who are more talented, they will, have better grades, and because it's easier. The assumption was that it was easier for them to study and understand everything, and it will also be easier for them to work on cases, assignments, and everything. But the fact is the exact opposite. So she said that students weren't equally talented. That's true. We all know bahwa tidak semua orang equally talented, tidak semua orang memiliki talenta atau bakat yang sama. But if they and I mustered sufficient effort over time, they'd get to where they needed. Tapi sebetulnya kita bisa kok mencapai titik tertentu yang kita inginkan, asalkan sama-sama bekerja sama untuk bekerja keras. So in conclusion, everyone is not equally talented, but everyone, she said, is talented enough to get to where we need to be. This is very important. Jadi dia bilang bahwa mungkin semua orang memiliki bakat yang berbeda-beda, tapi semua orang memiliki bakat yang cukup untuk mencapai titik tertentu. And that's a very good summary of her story. So then she moved to a different school from New York to San Francisco. The school is called Lowell High School. The details are not important. But the difference with her previous school is that this one, the admissions of the students was based on academic merit. Jadi dia pindah ke sekolah dan di sekolah yang baru ini lebih elit, seleksi masuknya berdasarkan kemampuan akademis. And the schools, the graduates from these schools go to the most highly competitive university in US. Jadi lulusan sini masuknya ke UCLA, Harvard, those crazy intellectual university. And she also said that distinguished more by their work ethic but then by their intelligence. So this school is quite distinct and very much different compared to her previous school because the distinction was given more on the basis of the work ethic rather than by intelligence. And then she mentioned very specific stories of her student named David Luong. Jadi dia cerita tentang salah satu muridnya yang bernama David Luong. So he was a quiet student. He didn't really participate a lot in the class and rarely volunteered to solve problems in class, whatever. So in principle, he was the quiet one, the type who do not want to excel in class or who do not want to do too much work in class. He's just there absorbing the information. Namun meskipun si murid ini pendiam, nggak begitu aktif di kelas, setiap tugas yang dia kerjakan dan dikumpulkan ternyata hasilnya sangat bagus. So every assignment that he submitted, it turns to be a perfect work. He always aced the quizzes, and most of the time he got the answer better than the teachers in this case. So he is very much hungry to learn and in some cases ask for harder assignment. Jadi sampai-sampai karena tugasnya selalu bagus dan bahkan kadang-kadang gurunya yang ngasih salah jawaban dan dia yang ngebenerin, dia sangat pengen belajar sampai akhirnya dia minta tugas atau PR yang lebih susah dari sebelumnya. And because the writer was such a great teacher, she proposed that David Luong should be moved to fast track or accelerated track class because he definitely outperformed the other students in the previous class. Jadi si David ini disarankan untuk pindah ke kelas akselerasi. And in the acceleration class, in the accelerated track, things didn't go as expected because turns out he got a D or a B in most of the math tests. But he did not stop because he knows that he needs to focus. He knows that he needs to ask for help, and he figure out what he did wrong and what was needed to do it differently. Jadi ternyata setelah pindah ke kelas akselerasi, dia nilainya jatuh, nggak bagus karena nilainya jadi D. Dan dia tahu kalau berarti dia harus lebih fokus belajarnya, dia harus lebih sering minta bantuan, nanya penjelasan ke guru dan lain sebagainya. Dan dia harus figure out, dia harus tahu dia salahnya di mana dan apa yang bisa diperbaiki. So this is very important work ethic that is being so much valued in the school. And by senior year, by the end of his high school academic year, he earned a perfect 5 out of 5 of the advanced placement exam. So if you don't know what this means, it's fine. In principle, he just got a very, very good score. Jadi di akhir tahun setelah nilainya tadi D, tiba-tiba di akhir tahun dia dapat nilai yang sangat bagus di akhir SMA-nya, sorry. And now David Luong earned a PhD in mechanical engineering from UCLA. Dia sekarang seorang PhD di mechanical engineering dari UCLA. So from these stories, she was less convinced that talent was destiny and more intrigued by returns generated by effort. Meaning yang berarti bahwa dia dari kisah si David Luong dan juga dari pengalaman dia mengajar SMA, dia menjadi kurang percaya terhadap pendapat bahwa talenta atau bakat itu menentukan masa depan seseorang atau destiny seseorang, dan lebih tertarik untuk melihat apa sih hasil yang bisa didapatkan oleh seseorang ketika dia mau berusaha or by having efforts. So those are the parts where she talked about her personal experience. Now, the parts where she mentioned several research or books will be colored in blue. So she mentions here, she starts with the notions that psychologists have long wondered why some people succeed and other fails. Kenapa ya kok ada orang yang sukses, kenapa ada orang yang gagal? And she quoted a book published by Galton yang merupakan sepupu dari Charles Darwin. He said in his book that people who are high achieving, they demonstrate unusual ability in combination with exceptional zeal and the capacity for hard labor. Jadi orang-orang yang high achiever, orang-orang yang quote-unquote sukses itu, mereka menunjukkan kemampuan yang luar biasa dalam zeal. Zeal itu artinya punya energi yang besar, mereka punya antusiasme, dan mereka punya passion. Dan mereka bisa mengkombinasikan hal tersebut dengan kapasitas untuk mengerjakan pekerjaan yang berat. Jadi mereka bisa diberikan beban kerja yang berat. Nah, kombinasi kedua hal itu membuat seseorang memiliki high achievement. She goes on with talking about Charles Darwin. I won't quote too much of that here. But Darwin mentions that in his opinion, he believes that zeal and hard work are ultimately more important than intellectual ability. So Darwin did not claim bahwa dia memiliki supernatural intelligence. He just claimed that he is so-so in terms of intelligence, but he just worked very hard until he gets to where he is at that time. So in other words, Darwin mengkombinasikan antara zeal atau hardworking atau great energy atau passion atau enthusiasm, mengkombinasikan zeal tersebut dengan kerja keras yang ternyata ini lebih menentukan menjadi faktor kesuksesan seorang jika dibandingkan dengan kemampuan intelektual. So yeah, so those are the analysis on Darwin's and his cousins. So they also she also raised the questions on how people differ in the pursuit of goals based on the research published by William James at Harvard. So I will not quote too much of this, but the research says that um, there is a gap between potential and its deactualizations. Jadi ada jarak antara potensi dan aktualisasi dari potensi tersebut. Artinya apa? Jadi mungkin seseorang punya potensi untuk mencapai titik 100, tapi ternyata dia tidak bisa mengaktualisasikan potensinya sampai 100. Mungkin dia hanya bisa mencapai sampai 50, 80, 70, we never know. Apa artinya? Dia bilang the human individual lives usually far within his limits. He possesses powers of various sort which he habitually fails to use. He energizes below his maximum and he behaves below his optimum. So let's say, like what I said earlier, an individual has the potential to reach 100. Kita tinggal 7 menit lagi. Okay, gimana, Van?
Nggak apa-apa, nggak apa-apa. Lanjut.
Okay, so maybe we can stop at I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or 3 minutes left and decide. Okay, so maybe someone have the potential to reach 100, but then they do not maximize that potential. They do not maximize the power that they have, and habitually they fail to use that power, and the energy is way below 100. Jadi sebetulnya banyak sekali manusia yang tidak memaksimalkan potensi yang mereka miliki karena mereka memiliki habit untuk untuk hidup dengan energi yang sangat kecil jika dibandingkan dengan potensinya, dan akhirnya kebiasaan tersebut yang membuat dia nggak akan pernah mencapai potensinya. So I think this is a very important things that we need to remember, because it basically says that we all have a certain potential, but unfortunately most of the time we do not maximize that potential or unable to reach that maximum potential. Kenapa? Nanti akan ada jawabannya. Then she continued talking about some other research about the difference of striver and natural. I don't want to talk a little more about that. You can read it more. Tapi ada satu term yang menarik di sini. Riset itu menyebutkan tentang naturalness bias. So it is defined as a hidden prejudice against those who have achieved what they have because they have worked for it, and a hidden preference for those whom we think arrive at their place in life because they are naturally talented. Nah, naturalness bias ini adalah sebuah situasi di mana diam-diam nih orang punya prejudis atau prasangka terhadap orang-orang lain yang nampaknya memang mereka udah talented nih gitu. Makanya mereka bisa sukses compared to orang-orang yang harus kerja keras dulu baru mereka bisa sukses. Ternyata orang-orang sukanya adalah yang berbakat. Joy Alexander umur 15 tahun, nggak tahu umur dia berapa, bisa dapat Grammy Award atau banyak award, tampil international jazz dan lain sebagainya. We prefer that kind of natural talent compared to misalnya Ganendra Awang sudah latihan piano jazz dari umur 15 tahun sampai sekarang umur 30 baru bisa gitu, tapi dia juga akhirnya punya album gitu. No, we don't like that. We have preference to like the natural talent more. That's our natural habit. Sama kayak di sini disampaikan juga in terms of perjodohan gitu misalnya. Mungkin kita ngomongnya, enggak kok, aku nyarinya yang cocok aja, yang baik, yang bisa perhatian, padahal di dalam hatinya adalah, of course we're looking for someone who's good looking gitu. Of course kita nyarinya adalah orang yang ganteng, yang enak dilihat, yang kalau kita bangun pagi hari ngelihat muka dia kita nggak mau muntah gitu. So these are called the naturalness bias. Sometimes we say something but it is actually a completely different, completely different things that we believe in, especially in terms of natural versus striver, orang yang berbakat atau yang striver. Fun, we only have 3 minutes left. Do we want to stop now?